the great solar return. And what they explain that to be is that if you could think about paper dolls, right? Like if you could think about many different parallel lives that you're leading. Some people call it past lives, but thank you, quantum physics. We think that through, the multiverse theory, we think they're parallel. So any trauma, any extreme pain or incarnated terror or shadow that is looming out there in any of these lives that hasn't been contended with, the bill is due.
I'd like to welcome to the show Bonnie McCliss. How you doing, Bonnie?
Hi, good. It's good to be here. It's nice to meet you and your viewers.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm excited to be talking to you today. You are
Likewise.
a buffet of psychic abilities. You have many, many different avenues that we can go down, from a channel to a psychic medium to an Akashic record psychic. I think
Yeah.
we're going to dig a little deeper into the Akashic record reading, but can you tell everybody what was your life like prior to the insanity that is your current life of reading with the Akashic record, psychic mediums, and channels? Like, what was your life prior to
Wow.
all of that?
It's in some ways it's always been some iteration or version of insanity. So, I mean, actually in my circumstance, becoming a psychic and a channel and a Akashic reader, all the things, it actually bred some kind of normalcy and direction in my life. Because, and many people who are natural, well, everybody has this gift, but
Mhm.
people who are really naturally geared toward this type of work, they often report, and I'm no different, coming into this world is just, it's a mess. You're sensitive, you're confused, you're a bit of an outcast. In my case, they fully believed I was mentally unstable for a while. And so, that world is a lot harder than moving through the spheres of consciousness and pulling
Mhm.
back information. It actually is like finally things make sense. so
Fair,
so this
fair
this is
enough.
so lovely. Yeah, really grateful to be in this work. Thank goodness. Yeah.
So when you were coming up, I mean, but I mean, did you understand that you had these abilities as a child? When did you first start noticing that you had these abilities?
Yeah, no, it's kind of like if, people who are like colorblind, they don't really realize that they're missing anything until somebody says, "Oh, here's the standard." So when I was a little girl, my first experiences, going back to about age of 4, were these incredible light beings that would just come through my ceiling. That looked like the Northern Lights, the Aurora Borealis.
Mhm.
And they would make these incredible sounds like symphonic music. So I would just lean back in my bed, and just enjoy the show, feeling, great. So that's what I just thought everybody experienced, honestly. And from there, it emerged into other imaginary friends and other astral interactions. And again, that's just what I thought life standard was. And I was pretty up there in my age, like 12 years old, until I hit some kind of contrast of
Mhm. Oh,
this is
wow.
not normal. Yeah, I remember being at school, and I don't remember exactly how old I was. I was probably almost 12, and referencing a spirit. And like that person over there, or that energy, or that that the shining people, right, is what I call them. And my friend on the playground going, what are you talking about? Like, there's, so I remember that moment of, oh, maybe not everybody sees the shining people. So weirdly normal
So then,
until
so
it
then
wasn't.
once exactly, and I've heard that from other channels and psychics and people who have these abilities that when they finally hit that contrast point, when someone just goes, "You're not like the rest of us," and depending on the kind of family you have, if you sometimes it's a supportive family, sometimes it's a family that
Mm-hmm.
says you're crazy, or or
Yeah,
religion gets thrown in there sometimes as
yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah.
How did you psychologically deal for until you were an adult deal with that? Because I mean, it's tough enough being a kid, let alone or a teenager, let alone
Yeah,
dealing with this
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, no kidding, no kidding. Actually, as far as like the trajectory of my life, I had a nice interactive world full of really polite light beings who, emitted love and light and great concerts. So I was not lacking for anything. The part in my story where it became super complicated is where the adults around me became really scared that I was maintaining these conversations, or I would have a lot of night visitors and
Mm,
visions and connections on what was coming kind of collectively sometimes. And it was just passed off as no big deal until pre-puberty. And that's when my mother, grandparents, teachers, people around me were like, there's some kind of mental issue or instability. So they took me to a bunch of doctors, and those doctors, at least back in the 80s, were like, no, this is odd. So they ended up actually diagnosing me with early onset schizophrenia and medicating me for it. So that's
wow.
when things got very, very, very weird. And their belief systems or their big words like hallucinations, it really wasn't throwing me. It was the medications that, for my system, it cut me off from my little Disneyland
Right.
light world. And as a kid, or people who know this work, you're constantly instinctively reaching out to read the vibrational spectrum around you in
Right.
space, like
Right.
it's an instinct. So I didn't stop that instinct. So when I had the medication, it kind of, it literally lowered everything, and I was reaching out into, I guess you could say, very shadow and heavy lower planes of consciousness. So what I would get back are very contorted, twisted, dark things, which obviously to any kid, it scared the bejesus out of me. And that was just a downward spiral. So that when you go that way, everything just kind of collapses. And
Right.
it went so far as to even a mental institution for a little institutionalization for a little while. And then I got out of that, and I just kind of was just in a state of just
Haze.
floating through life. Yeah, like
Yeah,
a
like a
haze.
haze.
Yeah.
Right.
And
So
it, it, yeah.
at what point did this crank back up, meaning in a good way? Like when did this, you
Yeah.
came into your own and you said, "No, this is who I am. This is my abilities and I'm here for this. I'm here to do this work." And you just
Yeah.
owned it finally and said, "The hell with all of you."
I wish that was my story, how I just took back my life and I had this big
And you got your
epiphany.
power.
I got my powers back and I said, this is me. But as life goes, and as the Akashic Records tends to show us, there are these patterns and these mile markers. Nobody's destined to hang out in the dark forever. There are these interventions. So I hit one of those markers as a young adult, in the form of, I was really, really depressed, and someone had referred me to a local woman who worked in therapy. No big deal. Like, I'd seen a lot of fancy doctors in my day, but I thought,
Mm.
it's getting really bad. And this woman, like, practically on the first visit or two, took that diagnosis and said, "That's not right. That's not what's going on. I think you're psychic." And so, I was kind of diagnosed psychic, actually. So, like, I like,
Love that.
so
Love that lady. Love that lady.
yeah, it was really great. So, not knowing really what that meant either, through her efforts of explanation, she even threw me into the deep end by showing me, kind of putting me on the spot. It's like, let me prove to you, tell me what my house looks like. Like, she kind of threw me into remote viewing even. And that was when I finally got it. Something's going on, and maybe this isn't just me hallucinating and being crazy. So that was the turnaround. Was this incredible, light woman, that said, "Hey, this might be something else," and it was just in my path. It was meant to be, to have this always obviously reroute. So thank goodness for that. So ever since that point, it was a lot better program to follow this than to be the other. So yeah,
So, and I wanted to kind of dig into something really quickly because it's something I think that might help people listening, is that you did have to go through a struggle. You had to go
yeah,
through that dark
yeah,
time you were
yeah,
talking about. And
yeah,
a lot of people who are watching are going through a dark time.
yeah.
Looking back on it, isn't the dark time what made you? It was the fire that forged the person that you
Yeah.
are today,
Yeah.
essentially. It sucked when you're going through
Yeah.
it, though. It
Does suck when
sucks.
you're going through it. Yeah.
It sucks. You're being in the fire, you're burning, it sucks.
Yeah.
But when you
Yeah.
get out and you look back, and that's one of the gifts of getting older. Knees are not one of them, uh
Right.
but
Right. Right.
but
Right.
but wisdom is, and you look back and you go, thank God I kind of went through that because it's who I am. Would you agree with this?
Oh, completely. Yeah, I think just about anybody would on the flip side of going through it. But that's exactly what I tell people. Like, really, what forged this ability, what actually helped me hold all of this and be able to do readings for people or global readings was the pain or the darkness. It's almost like it called out a crater in consciousness. And I could say this is the same for anybody going through suffering. It creates this kind of incredible depth of being, so that you can actually hold your birthright, as crazy as that sounds. So not only does it breed stamina, it expands your container to hold
Mm.
the light. It's kind of an interesting way to turn this, but 100%, when I look back on my background, I think there was never a moment of accident. There's nobody at fault here. There's no bad guy. There's only this kind of cast of characters and elements and this initiation, to be able to work in this world and to hold this space, which is, truly my honor, to do this. But yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that's my mission statement for us as we suffer, is to try to keep a little bit of our a tab on what it means for us in the long run, or what it's giving us in the ways of really kind of deepening our well, um, for that which we're asking for. It really, careful what you ask for. We stretch in a lot of different ways. This divine source is very creative. So, yeah, I definitely am
Now,
grateful. No accidents.
so during with your work that you do, have you come across, I mean, obviously you talk about karma a lot and about, I'm assuming like soul blueprints, purpose,
Mm-hmm.
these kind of things. In your opinion, when you're creating a blueprint on the other side or a soul plan on the other side, however you like to call it, that
Yeah.
there are these markers in life that you are like going to hit, but how you get
Mm-hmm.
there is really truly up to you. And that's where the free will comes into play, in many ways, because everyone's like, oh, if it's destiny, why are we here? And if everything's written already, then what's the point of this whole thing? But there's these mile markers of like, you're going to have this happen. You're going to have these big giant movements, like big giant mile markers that like you're going to meet this person you're going to marry, and you're going to have these kids because that's part, and you're going to take that job in Paris because, or something along those lines. Is that what you've found in your work?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I love that scenario of these mile markers. And I think that that's why astrology can be so accurate. When I look at my astrology or anybody's, I'm like, wow, you just sit back. Like, don't fight it. It's going to come the way it's going to come. So I think that, there is kind of a vertical, conversation to have in all this. We know the horizon. We know that our path is set, but there's an opportunity. It's not so much good or bad, but there's an opportunity of the how you approach each module of life or each marker, how you move through that. And this is something, that's been talked about from the beginning of time in many different spiritual sectors,
Hmm.
and this idea of ascension, or my guides say that we're becoming, this avataric, version of ourselves, this evolved state. So I think, it's not the what, we're going to encounter, actually. It's the how we go about it, how we receive it. And what I'm told is it's really simple while we're here. It's really not complicated. We are here to bear light in both usages of the word, to bear receiving the light, to walk home and to remember, who we are and where we've come from through all of these different, bombastic life scenarios, and to bear light, to be the impetus of healing for those that are in, a place of suffering. And this is one of those epochs where humanity, clearly everybody's aware of this, is up against one of the most incredible tests in Earth's timeline. So it's the how we're going to do this evolving thing, because we will do it one way or the other. So if that
But
makes sense.
it makes perfect sense. I would also argue that we are evolving just in these last 10 years, like you were saying. You wouldn't have never been able to I mean, you've been around long enough doing this work. 18 years
Yeah,
ago,
yeah,
not
yeah,
so much, like I think we were saying beforehand, like Akashic Records, is that the cereal? Like,
yeah, yeah.
but
I got
now
that more
people
than
are,
once. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, exactly. But now we have quantum physicists and Nobel Prize nominees who have had on the show talking about the Akashic field
that's
and
right.
how
Yeah,
it's how we're all connected through the Akashic field, and that the records are an aspect of the Akashic field, or are they the same thing? But it's in the conversation now, where it was not at all 5 years ago, 10
yes.
years ago. It was really
No,
on the outskirts. So we are, I think, evolving slowly
absolutely.
and
Mhm.
kicking and screaming sometimes, but we
Yeah, yeah,
are
yeah,
evolving
yeah.
without
Absolutely,
question.
absolutely, absolutely.
So let me ask you, with the work that you do, what is this, when you were doing a session with somebody, is there a session that sticks out in your mind as so transformative for the client and for yourself after you gave the reading?
Yeah, actually, my gosh, there are so many. The things that comes to my awareness are both for the individual and then for the collective. So I have a lot of, like, what you would call nighttime dictations on where humanity is going, in various different ways there. And then, also for the individual. And I think one of the most powerful sessions I have ever seen, side note, I've learned everything I know, I've learned from all these interdimensional beings, from all
Mhm.
these, different planes of consciousness, many different planes of consciousness. Um, but this one reading that I gave years and years ago, it started off as really unassuming. It was a nice lady, came with her mother, and I didn't think anything about it. And the woman came in and wanted to talk about her two daughters and her career. She had a career in politics, and it was a nice reading. And halfway through the reading, something phenomenal happened. I was transported into, sometimes you see these things coming in like little snapshots, and then they can take you even deeper into what I would regard as a vision. So I was pulled into what I would call a vision, where I was seeing a boat floating on water. It was an empty boat, and Christ himself was hovering above the boat. And it was just a really reverent and odd thing to see. And so how do you explain that to somebody? I'm like, well,
Right.
Jesus is here on a fishing boat. What does that mean to you?
Mhm.
So I said to the woman slowly, I was like, let me unpack this gently. I said, there's a boat, an empty boat floating on still water, and I see Jesus, which, boy, I can count on one hand how many times that's happened. And she said to me, oh my gosh, it must be my father. He's on a fishing trip. And I said, no, I don't know how I know this, but it's not your dad. And I said to her, whatever's coming is really not only it's big, it's going to change the course of your life, and it's really going to help a lot of people. But something big is coming. It didn't feel negative; it just was big. So I did the reading. It was fine, and she left. And about a week later, my phone just was blowing up from people who she knew, friends of hers, trying to get a hold of me. And apparently, her daughter, her 23-year-old daughter, drowned in a canoe accident, a boating accident. Five days later, and
Oh,
that was really, really, really tough. It was tough for it to be shown but not stopped. Okay, so they didn't say, "Hey, stop this kid of yours from going on this trip." Nobody said that. There was calm waters, and there was, well, Jesus. So I said to her, give us some time, and we'll come back, and I'll see what I can do. So a few days later, I met with the family, and her daughter came through. like a blinding light, the one that had passed away and drowned in the accident, and said, you've got a lot of, to her mother, you've got a lot of work to do. This is going to change lives. Like, this is fine. No big deal. Like, let's move on. They were extremely, grief stricken, as you can imagine. And so how this continued to unfold, a few weeks later, this woman said, would you just come out here? There's so many of my daughter's friends that would love to just talk to her. And, it's not really in my wheelhouse to do that, but I was like, something is saying, go do this. So all this to say, our relationship grew and grew and grew, and we built a retreat center on the property, which is now known as the Legend of Greater Things. We built this massive geodesic dome where we help people in grief. We help them, develop their consciousness and their intuition. So it's kind of a radical reading, because I didn't see any of that coming. I just saw the next step, the right next step. So,
and sometimes that's all you need. And that sometimes all you need is the next step. You don't need to know where the entire staircase is going.
Yes, yes, yes. But they are not going to get you out of the potholes. They're going to just show you where your soul's going. So that was just a radical reading from start to finish. Yeah.
Now, as of this recording, we're coming up on this eclipse thing that's happening on April 8th. And where I live in Austin, it's going to be a full eclipse. So we will have where it comes right over our city. Like, people are flying in. A lot of my former guests are flying in just to be here for this eclipse. Yeah, because it's kind of like every 200 years or something like that. This situation happens, apparently.
Yes.
So I'd love to hear from the Akashic Records, because a lot of people are, of course, terrified about what's happening. Like, oh my God, the world's coming. It's 2012 all over again. It's Y2K all over again. It's the Mayan calendar. It's like, okay, everyone calm the hell down. The world's not ending on April 8th. But I'd love to hear what you and the Akashic Records might have to say about the meaning of it and what will happen, if anything, to humanity on a spiritual standpoint. Again, I don't think a bomb or comets dropping, but what does it mean for us?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. There's a very long answer, and then there's a more condensed answer. So I'll give you. I like the
long answer. Let's go. I love going deep. I love going deep into these things. So
do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. So and this happened a little bit too. There was an apex of what I'm about to describe on the last eclipse that wasn't in totality. And our retreat center is going to be in the course of totality in Hot Springs, Arkansas. So it's really cool to see how where people are located as this is going on. So back in March 4th of 2020. I had one of the most incredible interactions of my lifetime, and I've had a lot of weird stuff happen, where I had a visitation. You can call it an energy from you can call it an ET, you can call it an energetic apparition visitation, whatever you want to call it. But it came in the middle of the night, and I walked through my wall, literally. And it had a lot to say about what was getting ready to happen for humanity. And of course, this was about approximately like 10, 11 days before COVID became America's problem, right? Or whatever that is that we were about to go through. So this being, and I'm speaking, I'm condensing down what was told to me. So this was a lot of telepathy that was happening. And it was a very feminine energy. At the time, I thought she was saying Ishani, but in further reflection, I think it was like an Asani-based being, who knows. But it said that there's about to be a terror, a push of terror on this earth for humanity. And I thought, the first thing that came to me, Alex, was how rude. What a rude thing to say.
Rude. Like, how dare you come in here with your light beam and tell us that we're doing something wrong? How dare you, sir?
I'm really pro humanity. I mean, I know we have our problems, but we're really trying. So I thought that was a really bit of an exaggerated term, terror. That was my first feeling. And this kind of contact is not something I've had this before, so it wasn't completely freaky. But anyway, So this being said, there's going to be a push of terror. And it went on to explain that we are going to undergo something that higher beings understood as the great solar return. And what they explain that to be is that if you could think about paper dolls, right? Like if you could think about many different parallel lives that you're leading. Some people call it past lives, but thank you, quantum physics. We think that through, the multiverse theory, we think they're parallel. So any trauma, any extreme pain or incarnated terror or shadow that is looming out there in any of these lives that hasn't been contended with, the bill is due. And so it's coming back. You're collapsing down like paper dolls coming back to one, or an accordion coming back to one. All of these erroneous extreme, extremities of your being need to come back, integrate, so that we can first individually experience a sense of wholeness of what our soul has encountered in form. So she said something to the effect that human beings will be going through one or the other, predominantly, either the return of pain. And I mean, let's just take a second to think about that. If you were going through a life where you were beheaded, or if you were in Nazi occupied Germany, and going through the Holocaust and lights out, energy never dies. So, we have to alchemize or transfigure, what's going to happen with the energy of pain. So all of those memories are coming back to your here and now without necessarily a lot of understanding of what it means. So if you're having a pain of some kind of terror and you're just waking up in modern 2020 going, oh my God, I have anxiety now. My life is wrong. My partners are wrong. So all of these really kind of non-indescript or misunderstanding of what's going on, everything's returning. So that's one side of the spectrum of what human beings are going through, which explains the mental field right now.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
She said the other thing that we're going to go through is the return of our greatest talent or our greatest gift or power. So just again, dramatically trying to explain this point, if you were a monk who learned to work with the laws of nature and to find cosmic harmony and levitate, that's waking up inside of you now. So not necessarily you're going to wake up and levitate out of your bed, but the terms or the quality of life or the lifestyle or the knowledge that would be required to work with such an incredible existential gift, that's just kind of coming home. So we have this incredible return for one. I thought that was enough. That's enough to contend with. All of us are coming
Exactly.
home. The second thing they said, or she said, was that if you are any kind of leader or channel or healer or anybody who's working to, with this kind of evolution state that we're in, you have to work with the higher levels of consciousness. And specifically, she said, 11th density consciousness. And I thought, what does that even mean? What are the rules for 11th density consciousness? And went on to say that this is going to be a non-binary state of mind, a non-dualistic lifestyle of non-judgment. That if you were to pull from anything that could be of use to Earth at this time, it's going to have to come from that united point, that non-judgmental or non-binary field. Anything else, she said, you're just pulling from Earth's archives that aren't necessarily going to advance us where we're going. Mm. And the third and final thing that I was told is that some of the chemical aspects or biological or environmental aspects of our Earth were going to begin to change pretty dramatically. That we were going to be experiencing a lot of, even radiation in Earth's atmosphere. So all of that to say, it's been this kind of trajectory from the last 4 years of these apexes, specifically with the eclipse or certain numeric harmonic convergence points, where the veil becomes really, 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 really thin. And it's a lot, I guess you could say, easier or more transparent for us to access what we're working with karmatically, or some of the pain bodies that are returning from other live streams, if that makes sense,
Hmm.
or to really get in touch with our innate, inherent gifts as souls in form. So to me, these eclipses are like glass windows, a moment of clear transparency to reach into the beyond of your own existence and pull back these soul themes,
Mm.
you know, more than ever before. So I'm really excited for the eclipse, just take a moment in stillness and trust and listen to what's being returned. So not
So
an end of the
the
world, a return of your own. Yeah,
Fair enough. Independence Day is not coming. The aliens aren't
yeah.
coming.
No, no,
It's
no,
all
no.
it's all good. Yeah. So as far as the eclipse on the 8th is concerned, is there a difference in is it a no matter where it is in the world, it affects the planet or expects everybody, or is it like you and me, we have a great view,
Yeah.
we're gonna get more of that juice than anybody else?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there's so many different people that have different opinions on this, and
Mhm.
I feel like these things that are propellants for our spiritual advancements or our evolution, these things that we get to participate in can take our consciousness anywhere. So I think the eclipse at large, the energy of the eclipse is going to affect everybody on the planet. But the people who are journeying to be a part of the experience of watching this incredible unfoldment of the shadow fall in the line of light, I think it's going to be such a moment of awe
Mm.
that perhaps the people in that experience just propel themselves into uh, deeper in the window of what they're looking at soul wise. So I think the experience alone could be its own kind of kindling to the fire, or
Mm.
propellant. But honestly, no matter where you are in the country, you're gonna have the opportunity to work with these energies. It's just my personal belief.
Now the idea of an eclipse, which is there's light and then there's a darkness that covers the light, and but
Yeah.
then gets to open itself up again to the light. Is this not an analogy for life in general? We come from the light, we go
Yeah.
through this whole thing, and then we go back to the light.
Yes.
Is that kind of like a when it's happening? Is that kind of what's almost supercharging our journey right now as humanity by going through these kind of
For
things?
sure. Yeah, for sure. It's like humans, look, here's your map. We promise, this is the program. I think it
Mhm.
is supercharging. I think you take, these combining, charges or chargings or efforts of shadow and light. And it's almost like you have the opportunity yet again to pass through the mandorla, like this kind of, eye of the needle. But, I've gone through a full eclipse before, in Tennessee a
Mhm.
few years back. And, as a psychic, the thing that I found that was just a phenomenal experience with working with eclipse energy is the space that it creates. So, people that are in the line of the eclipse, the birds stop chirping, the insects stop trilling. There's no cars on the road. It is like if you've ever witnessed an eclipse, and maybe this is your experience, it's like the earth falls silent and in a vacuum. It is so hard to describe. It's incredible. And in this vacuum of space, again, not only do you have the charging efforts of light into the dark as a metaphor, you have an unbelievable moment where time feels, and I think actually truly stops.
Mm.
And that again is an opportunity to go deep into that soul window and explore. It's kind of like a near death experience, in
For the
my
planet.
opinion, to just,
For the
yeah,
planet.
for the planet. Exactly. Like, let's
Yeah,
go, let's get a truth here. Yeah.
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 I haven't. I've seen a partial because there was a partial eclipse. I think last year here in Austin, where the light got
Oh,
really
yeah.
weird and funky outside, and I didn't.
Yeah.
I haven't looked up because I didn't have the proper glasses. So but the whole play, there's just this eerie energy, It's like it's 12
Yeah, that's it.
o'clock.
Yeah,
It's 12
yeah,
o'clock, but it's not night, it's not day. It's just this weird thing. I actually don't think I've ever experienced a full eclipse, like me being at a place where a full eclipse happened. So it's gonna be interesting to see what that energy is like, because you're absolutely right. There
yeah,
is
yeah,
an energy that comes associated with that. And it's just
yeah,
even that partial eclipse, the vibe, just the vibration, the frequency, just something changed while that was going on. It was where people were moving. I was at the supermarket and I didn't look up, but I was like, what the hell happened to the light? Like I had no idea it was coming. I was just,
right,
it was a
right,
very
right.
interesting thing. So good. So we don't have to worry about April 8th. Everything's going to be okay.
No,
It's actually going to
no,
be supercharging our evolution and so on. Okay,
all the
fantastic.
things. It's like a portal. It is what you make of it. So if you want to go in seeking out the pain of all of your destinies, go for it. I honor that. Or if you want to go in with the highest intention,
Mhm.
with your own personal and collective evolution, obviously that's a good idea. So
Fair enough.
it is
Fair
what you
enough.
make of it. Yeah,
Now, Bonnie, you do read the Akashic records, and how when you go into a trance, I guess, or
yeah.
a state, if you
A
will,
state.
when
Yeah,
you a
yeah.
state, not a trance, but a state when you go into the Akashic records, do you mind going a little deep? And we could have some questions we could ask the Akashic records. And are they
Sure.
when you and people always talk about the Akashic records, are these the beings who kind of control or not control, but like caretake the Akashic? Because we think of a library with 1,000 billion books, and
Yeah, yeah,
there's a
yeah.
couple of librarians moving around. It's the only way we can wrap our head around it. Who are you actually connecting with when you actually are going into the state?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question. So, when people talk about the Akashic records, I am so happy it's coming up because this is the part of our evolution where we learn, our inheritance and what this life could possibly potentially be about collectively. But really, the word Akasha just translates into space. It's the field. So when you do intuitive work, when you go into the space, it is like the cosmic internet. It is all the same. Whether you call it the Akasha or a psychic space or whatever you want to call it, it's all the same thing. So I think when people think of the Akashic, yes, they think about this book in the sky that holds memory, but it also holds all of the potentiality of now, the how of now, and then,
Mhm.
of course, the timelines that could potentially unfold in the future. But also, I think when people think of the Akasha, they think it's a high minded resource. It is something that you're going to go to the highest planes of content or information for the individual that you're with or for the collective. And that's kind of how I experience it. When I go into the Akashic records, I go as high as my human avatar and my experience will allow me to go. And at that point, it is they don't individuate. It's a collective light. It's a Christ consciousness, and
Mhm.
they do like to work with the highest position on what's happening on a soul level. So I like to say it's like therapy on speed, right? It's all of these kind of powerful intentions of the soul and what karma you're working through and what your greatest talents are. So yeah, it's a coalition, it's a collective light. People say, who are you talking to? I'm like, that's a
Mhm.
good question. High benevolent light beings. Uh that's they're
You
the
should
I
just
am. It's the consciousness of Christ. So they don't really say hi. My name is Bob. It's just incredibly intelligent field of light and wisdom. So I don't try to question them too much. I just stay in my lane and
gotcha.
just
Gotcha.
listen. Yeah, yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. So yeah. So what do you need to do to get into the state? How do you do it?
Sure, sure, sure. So it's not a full trance. It's just more of like kind of a dreamy meditative state where I tend to talk a little bit fast and lose time. So I'm going to trust Alex that you're going to be so good at keeping the time as
Yes,
we
I
go
will.
into this.
Yeah,
So
yeah. We will not be here for
yes,
4 hours. Don't worry.
yeah, we
Yes.
could really get to some good stuff in 4 hours. Okay, so yeah, yeah. So I'm ready whenever. If you have questions, we'll see what comes
Sure.
through. Sure. Yeah.
How do you see humanity's collective future evolving in the coming years?
They immediately go to this place of fearlessness. Actually, they're showing me that we're all worried about being fearful, and fear is going to take us down and create this anarchy or this split of consciousness. But the first thing they say is to trust the. This kind of surprises me a little bit, actually, but to trust a lot of where technology is advancing us to, that it's not all bad, that there are some really positive advancements in technology that's going to take the weight off of human experience. So that's kind of an interesting point. They say to me that through the sun, we're going to respond to a lot of light language or a lot of messages that are coming through for individuals that are ready to remember their worth, to remember where they come from. So a lot of these solar flares and ejections are going to speed up, but for some, it's going to feel like a homecoming. It's going to feel like something that is what has been missing the whole time. So kind of like a return of information. They're saying, don't fear it. They also say that time is going to feel like it is speeding up quite a bit as we go through in the next coming years. But again, don't fear evolution itself is the big message that they're giving so far. Try to trust your life and trust the plan of this divine earth. They keep saying there's nothing to be afraid of, which I don't know if we could all agree with that, actually.
In what ways do you believe our current economic trends will shape our global community?
I'm asking them about anything with economics that they want to speak to at this time. They're telling me there's a propellant in economics or in our social structure, similar to what you were speaking about earlier, Alex, about the dark or pain being this greatest teacher that we could ever know, and that there are inherent beauties and talents and gifts with co-creating with the earth and the cosmos, being one with harmony. And so as these kind of economic, some people would see it as crisis, but these economic shifts that are transpiring, some people are going to feel in tune and alignment to kind of take their power back, so to speak, to kind of start their own homesteading, to start their own gardening, to trust that their talents are worthy and that they can create and feed their family from it. So a lot of this is actually propellants to remember, but to not stay confused and continue to go into a broken system. It's a stop, it's a reset. And they're saying you'll be surprised how many people are listening currently. And as people listen collectively, they start to change the tempo, the harmonics of the planet. So, our biggest teacher right now is things that have always worked will not continue to work, and that's going to be our greatest lesson, to dig underneath it and remember our greatest talents and implement them. So economically, it looks like there's going to be a freeze, not a horrible freeze, nothing to fear, but a return back to values, instincts, and basics of our best versions of ourselves and human nature. So again, the dark only beckons on the light. So I like that. That's really good.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Now, can you shed any light on the spiritual significance of the political races going on this year around the world?
Yes. Again, with the Akashic records being very high-minded, I've asked them about this one. And because it's a close or the beginning of the close of polarity as we move into a new paradigm altogether, what looks like a problem isn't necessarily a problem. What looks like a disaster could be the catalyst creating that crater that's going to bring in light. So politically, they say that everything is in alignment from the highest point looking down. So I know that doesn't satiate maybe some of the questions out there about politics, but I get a lot of, don't be alarmed. Everything is working for the higher good. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I've been able to get out of them with that. Yeah.
So in other words, the Antichrist is not showing up on either side of the aisle.
I don't think we'll see that in our lifetime. I think we're going to see. I think we're going to see. What they say is this incredible technological advancement, which we're already seeing, and incredible empowerment with our organic beings and memories, if our greatest talents are returning, oh my gosh, what could we create? So they say that you have nothing to fear but fear itself, truly. And it's your will, it's your call. Whatever you want to lean into, you will create and breed. So they don't seem too worried about it in our lifetime. No.
What is the Akashic view on the role of the current conflicts in the world's karmic journey?
They like to speak of it as critical mass. I think possibly in quantum physics or in a physics analogy, maybe it's the M theory, but they say that just like you draw back a bow, all the way back to critical mass with conflict, all the way to that tension where it's practically quivering and you feel like it's going to snap. When you let go of the arrow, it creates momentum. And so again, it's hard to understand that conflict could be the predecessor to this new earth. But there is a close of this paradigm. There's a closing of polarity. They're saying, it's interesting what we're doing as we're kind of creating an emphasis on polarity. If you notice, you're kind of we as humans are zeroing in on people we don't even know and latching in and polarizing them. If somebody says, "Oh, I think it's light outside," you'll have a whole cast of people saying, "No, it's not. It's a little dark." So there's a reason that we are polarizing and allowing this to kind of hit some kind of climax again, so that it can create critical mass and then eventually end up with this amazing energy of momentum towards evolution. So, yeah.
From the point of view of the Akashic records, what happens to a soul once it passes?
From the Akashic point of view, especially from where I can see it. So, humbly from where I stand in the Akashic view, it looks like we just keep living. And I know that scares people. In fact, some Akashic, information states that we are this isn't even really life. This is like some pre-life. This is an iteration of life. This is like pre-game. But where we go is a continuation or an ascension. So from an Akashic standpoint, it really does look like life continues on, and continues to build more and more and more. So death isn't really something that shows up in the way that we know it from an Akashic standpoint, if that makes sense. Yeah.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Now, what insights can you offer about the existence of the multiverse from the Akashic perspective? This is a long answer. Go for it. Go deep as you like.
Long answer. Oh my goodness. Well, I think that it kind of goes back to that idea that they originally presented with this paper doll effect. With the undulating forces of the universe, the pattern of the universe is this expansion and this collapsation. It's the pulse, it's the sound. And, it's kind of like the analogy that they give me is that, if you can imagine a big explosion of light where it actually went through a point of separation, and creating all of these different, tiers of the universe, or this, you can call it a hologram or a multiverse, whatever you call it, but a separation from source is really what they focus on. And if you can think of it in the example of a blast, some light beings or some aspects of light or souls, however you want to look at this, well, they landed really close to source. Some people would regard those as angels or saints or higher beings. And some souls or fractals of the light ended up very, very far from source. And that's kind of, if you start to really take the cosmos into account, is kind of the way spatially, if we could look at it that way, it's kind of replicating that. And so the whole soul's journey is a reconnaissance mission. And it works both ways. So those that are close to the light have a call to go and pull back, those that are further. So you can see that in the healing arts. You can see that in us trying to help people shift consciousness, doing everything we can to allay suffering or to help our brothers and sisters, whatever you want to look at it like that way. So part of this, this universal program is a reconnaissance or a retrieval or a walk back home. So for those that are very, very out and away from light and steeped in darkness and suffering, their journey and job is to receive the light or to allow it to come back in. Like I said earlier, we're either bearing light as a receiver or bearing light as a projector. And so the whole thing is this undulating pattern of expansion and contraction, retrieval and homecoming. So it's a lot bigger than that, but it is, when you break it down to its most simplistic pattern, or either going out or coming back. It's this contraction and expansion. And that's what we're seeing in our everyday life. We have these high points and these low points. And from the perspective of the Akasha, the journey is knowing where you belong in that pattern. Are you the one that is so close to the light and the truth that you put yourself out there to try to help others find their way home? Or are you, one's not better than the other, actually. Are you someone who is, further from the light that needs to trust and learn how to receive? So it's complex, but very simple when you get down to it.
Fair enough. Now, there's a lot of fear around AI and artificial intelligence because obviously Skynet's coming for us. The world's coming to an end. The Terminator should be here any second. The Matrix, and so on.
On the spiritual, well, this is an interesting question because my human self looks at AI and it's really intimidating. I look at it like, this can't be good. From my background, I'm not super excited about the trajectory. But from the Akashic standpoint, it's an unknown, and so we naturally fear it, right? So, but they say that there's a lot of positive evolution coming from the AI point. Now, everything is going to speed up, and it looks like as humans speed up in the way that they process life or content or energy or information, they move into what they're talking about, this avataric state. So it's, when we think about AI, we go straight to technology or, taking away jobs or,
right,
bleeding out humanity altogether. But they often say that, really what we do with technology and how we treat it individually, or how we fear it or we accept it, actually goes into the bounty of how this world is going to progress, if that makes sense. So what we believe about it is what's going to unfurl. But again, when I tune into on this point, they say, trust the earth, trust the divinity, trust the consciousness. And I don't think that that's a popular opinion right now. I think that through this polarized state of what we're going through, you have to pick a side. It's either good or it's bad. So I think that, it's really overall, it'll be necessary for where we're going. So I know that is such a hot question right now. And it is hard to see its benefit long term, but again, I'm left with more as the meets the eye is happening. So yeah.
And I'll chime in because I lean towards the positive side. I think AI is extremely positive for us all, and that it's going to help us. I think we'd slow down our spiritual evolution without AI, because AI is going to take away a lot of the mundane things that take up a lot of our time. And once you are free of those mundane things, you can think a little bit more about yourself, work on your spirituality, work on your missions and your purposes in life without having to worry about a lot of these mundane things. Very much like the Greeks did all those many thousands of years ago, when they were just sitting around thinking about deep thoughts, while, obviously slavery was what was causing them to have all that free time. But taking away the slavery aspect of it, just the removing of the mundane stuff, where you can then focus on deep thoughts, if you will.
I think that's what they say. It'll be what we make of it. That's the how we get to each point, each marker. It'll be what you make of it. And the more people that can see where this could go in a positive way, it really is shifting the tides of consciousness, clearly.
Now, you said earlier a comment about how we consume content, and it's very fascinating to me, for someone who comes from Hollywood, been doing storytelling and working in that space for over 30 years now. I'm really curious to see how the Akashic Records thinks, or their views on Hollywood, how we consume content, social media, and so on?
Yes, yeah, this is a great question. And this is one that's close to my heart because I've always loved the power of media. It is such a powerful tool. And, in my walk in wanting to work with people or speak about some of the things that's being given through me, media is an incredible forum. And over the years, I've almost heard my guide say, wait, it's not time yet. Those that are in media are not at a place of consciousness where you could be heard or others like you can be heard. So over even 10, 15 years ago,
Oh,
I was stopped from even going into it, or my wagon was parked. So it's kind of I like this question because it really speaks to even the AI or any type of process of ascension. Look, we didn't really nobody set this model in motion. It's our DNA. It's the shift of consciousness. It's the programming within us is slowly in just not tolerating dense models of energy in the form of content or fear production or these really sensationalized parts in Hollywood. There's something in us that's waking up, that scientists refer to this as the imaginal cells. So it's like a part of us, part of our DNA is literally like the caterpillar. It's mutating, it's shutting down, it's
mhm.
dying, and a new part of us is waking up. And so us as content creators are kind of feeding that and feeling that, and you're watching TV and media slowly evolve in a way kind of by itself. We're doing it, we're waking up and putting it out there. So I'm really excited and hopeful for media, and it's just going to continue to have this kind of high-minded, um, it has an opportunity to be high-minded. But the thing that I sense the most is that viewers, humanity as a whole, can't will not be able to tolerate old models of what they're receiving. I mean, TV is just and media is going in. We're in that theta state, and we're just receiving. It's like junk food. We won't be able to digest it. We're going to need higher organic, authentic content, and it's going to keep going that way. Which what I want to surmise on, it is interesting. Again, the Akashic records suggests that we just need to participate and align. We don't need to work as hard as we think we do and change it all up. A lot of this will continue to progress kind of with or without us. It's our choice to
Right.
participate as creators, with what we put out or what we receive. So I have really high hopes for media.
Mhm.
And I feel also that media will drive communities to meet in person. So like
Mhm.
even with like your show, Alex, I feel like part of the progression of what you're doing, whether you see it coming or not, is going to be options to meet your viewers in person or to gather, kind of like this eclipse thing, where your bodies are actually in physical location, creating this interesting energetic vibration together, which I find very fascinating. So I'm getting a lot of that. Media will stir communities to come together no matter where they live all over the world. So that's going
Beautiful.
to be fun. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that was a great answer. Now, can you shed some light on the karmic implications of the conflicts that we're having around the world today? Yeah, because there seems to be some karma in the world going on right now with these conflicts. There's two major ones going on in the news right now with the Israeli-Palestine conflict and the Russian-Ukraine conflict, which are old, just old, some even thousands of year old arguments and wars that they're still going on. So I'd love to hear the Akashic Records point of view on this.
Great question. I don't know that I could answer that in one fell swoop, right? Because this is
Sure.
such a complex system of events and participants at large. But, it brings me to an interesting point that I heard recently, um, on an astrological level. So back in October, when we had that partial eclipse, for some of us, some of us, it was a partial eclipse in the fall in eclipse season. Um, some of the deep underground astrologers were talking about this eclipse being one that was going to activate the 12 tribes of Israel. that was going to bring up, I guess you could say I don't know if we would call it karma or the initiation, or something was going to happen on the Israeli soil. And that was days before some of these world events transpired. And so what that brings to me is kind of, it only comes back and validates what I hear from the Akashic spectrum, is that events, even though from our perspective that are considered negative or conflict, that, are just really, they're jarring us, they're bringing us into a split polarity, even in our own consciousness, have an incredible productive place. They say to me often that, human beings are just reading an energy schematic. So this brings us to something called the law of correspondence: as above is below, is within is without, and that we're receiving kind of a signal. And as we receive this signal, this maybe this geometric formula, we are interpreting it, and it's dictating the reality that we're experiencing. And I know that's kind of heady. So as it's like reading these energetic braille that is being expressed to us, from our universal community. So as we evolve as a solar system, as we evolve to understand that, again, conflict's not taking us anywhere. Because what is conflict? That's usually born from greed, from fear, from polarization. But the thing is, we're closing down the polarization. Could it get more complex and complicated before it gets better? Sure. But it too is working out its system as it grows. The earth knows what it's doing. So I'm not saying sit back and put your head in the sand. I'm just saying that from my perspective, what I'm told and where the Akasha weighs in on this is that things are not always what they seem. And sometimes the contrast and the conflict is creating room for expansion, which we could all agree that there's some truth in that, probably. Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah. Now, what are your thoughts on how humanity can engage with the concept of the multiverse and how it works with the parallel realities and how we do our day-to-day stuff, knowing that this information and this concept is out there?
And these parallel realities. Well, there's tiers of doing this, I would think. I think it depends on where you are in your abilities to meditate and to go within. So I think if you're just someone who's new to this world, who wants to experience their, parallel lives, you can't do any of that if you can't maintain some space and stillness. So obviously we need to do the meditation. We need to work on going within. And we need to learn to trust the sensations that would develop in our body to even access this kind of information in the first place. So, I get these people that want to talk to the ETs, or they want to know what's going on in parallel lives. And the first thing they'll do is look up and out the stars, for this information. And then it's kind of like our instinct to go out to the great beyond. But really the portal to all of this great information that can be had about soul lives or the multiverse or different types of beings in the multiverse, you have to go within. The portal and the Stargate is going within. So I think that, again, going back to these eclipses or going back to these, what we call harmonic convergence numbers, or some of these things that are opportunities on a global level to go in and to meditate, you're going to get what you can handle. I mean, if you can handle seeing all of your parallel lives, you will. But again, the idea is that we're returning back to ourselves. So, that's a big answer, or a big question to answer. I think my big statement on that is learn to develop your intuitive abilities, learn to go within, learn to meditate. We know, so that you could even handle the spectrum of what your consciousness is involved with. Yeah.
Bonnie, I can keep asking you questions for another 3 or 4 hours for sure. Thank you so much for this amazing conversation. Now I'm going to ask you a few questions I ask all my guests. What is your definition of living a fulfilled life?
To me, it's trust. Radical trust in whatever is in your path. It's the non-attachment and non-aversion, just like the Buddha said. You know, a fulfilled life is seeing the purpose in all of it. If you're going to do any of life, take it all. So I think just like we talked about earlier in this interview, you know, the dark is not always the bad guy. So being present and allowing your trusting yourself and whatever shows up in your path, if you can get there, then you can go deeper into the pattern of what you're here to do. You can see your propensities, you could see your spiritual edge, your processes, and that's all we want. We just want to know. We just want to know who. Everybody wants to know the same thing. Who am I? Why am I here? Where am I going? And when is it over? So, I think fulfillment is the capacity to be present and radically trust that which passes, you know, through your life and your experience. Easier said than done, for sure.
Very easier said than done. But I agree with you 100%. Now, if you had a chance to go back in time and talk to little Bonnie, what advice would you give her?
I would tell her you really don't have to stop playing Barbies just because you're really don't have to stop talking to imaginary friends. You don't really have to stop playing. You really can keep playing. I think that's the thing that that keeps us tapped in. That childlike nature, that play, that silliness. You know, that you know, you get older, you get really serious
Oh,
and very, very right and rigid. And I would just say, don't listen to them. Keep playing. Keep imagining. But you know, and honestly, I've already had that conversation, and you know, we worked it out. It's okay.
good,
Yeah,
good,
but
good, good.
keep the play. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now, how do you define God or source energy?
You know, the answer that comes to, I think, just about anybody who would be given that question would be love or infinite love. But I think it's this Akashic space. It is God to me. It is the life force that is all. It's infinite. It's what can't be seen. It's the opportunity. It's patterns within patterns and within patterns of consciousness. So yes, God is love to me, but I think it is infinite potential, infinite
Fair enough.
potential of what we could get in touch with. So I mean, gosh, I don't know that I'm qualified to even answer that, but that's what it means to
Of
me.
course you are. We are all part of God. We
Yeah,
are all
yeah,
source. Of
yeah.
course you can answer that.
Right. We all have our answer. You got it.
Yes. Now, what is love?
I think it brings me back to that bearing light thing.
Mm,
I think honestly, true love or real love is a one-way street. It's, you know, this
mm,
light without expectation, without looking backwards or going, where's mine? It's this, you know, purified and divine intention and knowledge of, you know, what comes into you. But it's this ability to bear light, to put it out into the world. Obviously, that's a version of love. But over my years and working in this world, love is a receptivity to light as well. So
mm.
it's, you know, a surrender at the end of the day of giving and receiving. Sure. Wow, these are great questions. These are like existential. I can speak to you with my mind and my eyes, but I mean, words fail me, really.
Fair enough. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, as they
Yeah.
say, this is not my first barbecue. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It shows. Right.
and um, and finally, what is the ultimate purpose of life?
The ultimate purpose of life is to journey away from the light and then make your way back. So it literally is the journey of remembering
Expand
where you come from, expand and
and
contract.
contract.
Yeah.
Contract.
Yeah.
Exactly. We brought it back. Do you
And
see how we brought it
endure.
all the way
And
back?
endure. Yeah, all the way.
All the way back.
And to not fight that and to not fight that process,
Oh,
really. I think is to get to the point where we just have an innate trust of God and the divine plan, where we're just a part of the cosmic, you know, the harmony, and we just flow and dance with all of nature without resistance. I think that's the evolution. That's the avataric state to work with, you know, as one united force, for sure. But you know, we're doing all right.
we're doing okay. We're doing okay. Now, where can people find out more about you and the amazing work you're doing in the world?
Yes. So I have a website, psychicbonnie.com. If you would like to work with me privately and see your karma and your talent. But we also run a retreat center in Hot Springs, Arkansas. We call it the Dome. It's this 2,000 square foot geodesic womb out in the middle of a field. It's very, very fun. And that the name of that business is The Legend of Greater Things. We believe in hope for the future and that this is all happening for divine purpose. So those are the two places where I hang out.
Now, do you have any parting messages for the audience?
No matter what, trust your life. Whatever crosses your path, whatever shows up, the dark, the unexplainable, the confusing. Trust does not mean that you're putting your head in the sand and giving up and just going to drink the Kool-Aid of opposition. Trust means that you believe in your birthright and that you're participating in the larger plan that this earth has in store. So, radical trust and compassion. Have compassion for everything you encounter, and you'll do all right. Nothing can get you down at that point, I don't think. Yeah.
Bonnie, it's been such a pleasure and honor speaking to you today.
Likewise.
Thank you so much for being on the show and for the amazing work you're doing to awaken the planet.
Absolutely.
I
Likewise.
appreciate you. Thank you.
Very good to be here.
Thanks for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue your journey, and don't forget to subscribe.